Hello. Yes, what you're seeing isn't some figment of your imagination. I am Hakim, a white guy from Wisconsin. I'm just very good at doing different voices. I thought I'd do a face reveal in order to soothe your spirits before this analysis video. JT very kindly let me out of his basement for this occasion, so make sure to leave a "thanks JT, very cool" in the comments.
Alright, all jokes aside, very sick Hakim here with another video. Everyone has had a political journey towards becoming a socialist. Likewise with our beautiful baby boy JT from Second Thought. Years ago, he put out this video, titled "What if North Korea became democratic?" I thought we could go through it kind of as a case study of all the all-permeating liberalism people are force-fed and forcibly taught throughout their entire lives, and how that results in this form of political analysis. Of course, JT is an absolute Sigma Chad now, and he's kept this video up on his channel to show how all of this stuff can be unlearned and how people can go in a correct political direction. I do apologize for the stuffiness of my voice. Usual side note, there will be a nuanced presentation of the conditions of the DPRK. That doesn't make it a perfect country or whatever other nonsense someone will conceive of in their mind. Don't insult your own intelligence or mine and enjoy the sourced information, which is unusual for any DPRK content. Funnily enough, the US and Britain are on the thumbnail, implying that those are democratic countries. In both countries, you have the choice between a capitalist party or another capitalist party. Private property is an enshrined right that cannot be challenged. We're not talking about personal property here. And funding for political groups is overwhelmingly from the absolute wealthiest, who of course get kickbacks in the forms of votes and resolutions that aid their purposes and interests. Plenty of unelected people have massive influence in both systems, to the point of even determining political outcomes for the vast majority of the population. Second Thought has even made a great video you can check out on this here. Alright, let's jump right in.
If you were asked to make a list of oppressive regimes, North Korea would probably be pretty close to the top of the list. Under the iron-fisted leadership of the Kim family, currently Kim Jong-un, North Korea has become something of a bizarre novelty. Ridiculed for their floundering nuclear weapons program, but feared for their zealous hatred of the West and the potential for what their nuclear program could become.
Damn, they said liberal JT didn't exist. That he couldn't hurt you. Alas. There's the still being sick part. This is a perfect case study in this sort of liberal covering of these topics. Something borrowed from the fascists, actually. Plenty of liberals play both sides. Oh, this country's so pathetic and backwards, but also is a mortal danger. Somehow. The point, of course, obfuscates the reasoning behind this sort of rhetoric. Usually to support the State Department agenda of destabilizing said countries for easier and cheaper access to labor, raw materials, and untapped markets, something the DPRK is rich in all three of.
North Korea is a desperately poor country. Starvation and malnutrition are commonplace among the citizens.
Of course, we know that the malnutrition and starvation issues of the DPRK are long since gone, and were more commonplace in the 90s as a direct result of the aftermath of the legal dissolution of the USSR, as well as crippling sanctions placed on the DPRK with the sole intention of starving them. Now, though, the DPRK has better stats on this than the majority of Asia, and even when compared with countries wealthier and unembargoed. Of course, another liberal favorite is to present certain information while omitting the necessary nuance and context as to serve a singular political take-home message. This stuff really isn't always intentional either, although is with all major private and state outlets in, for example, the US. The poison of liberalism is that it engenders these types of perspectives and approaches as a default, because it's the only things you see. There's a reason critical thinking isn't commonplace within the US, for example. The purpose, though, is to reproduce certain perceptions without the qualifying information. That way, everybody continues to uncritically despise the DPRK, calling for sanctions and even war against an innocent country threatened by American imperialism for nearly a century at this point. This aids in the aforementioned labor, resource, markets point. Imperialism 101, consent manufacture 101.
But the image the government projects to the world, and to its own population, is one of peace, freedom, and a glorious future. This is all government-sanctioned propaganda, of course.
Peace, freedom, and a glorious future. Doesn't every country do that? The reality being, though, the DPRK has done fairly well for themselves, much like Cuba, despite crippling sanctions and international vilification. That's not even mentioning outright sabotage that would have brought down any other country that didn't have the same level of public support as well as dedicated political organizations. Had they not been embargoed, I think it's safe to say they'd be far, far ahead of the Asian continental, as well as countries of equivalent population and economic development average, which in certain respects they already are. As for government-sanctioned propaganda, well, the vast majority of information Americans hear is private corporation-sanctioned propaganda telling you to bomb Iran and elect more wealthy people, with the rest being government-sanctioned propaganda. A deeper dive in media control under capitalism can be found with my video here.
but it's hard to know just how much the average North Korean knows about the true state of their country. Luxury buildings are just empty shells used for show, and even in propaganda films it's easy to tell that none of the technology works.
You'd be surprised how much they know. In fact, they seem to be better informed than the average American. Some great documentaries to check out are Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang and Seoul and My Brothers and Sisters in the North. The luxury buildings point is simply not true, but this point is widely reported without a source, as is routine with reporting on the DPRK. See my video here for a deeper dive. The actual reason is, a lot of these buildings are on extended building plans, like the Ryuyong Hotel, because of material shortages due to sanctions. A great channel that covers this sort of stuff is DPRK Explained, which I highly recommend you check out. The none of the technology works point is another silly thing, as, there are hospitals, universities, schools, power plants, etc. there. The country wouldn't exist if their, for example, computer systems or whatever else didn't work, which they very clearly do, to the point of their healthcare system being praised as a model for third world nations.
If we juxtapose this authoritarian, hyper-militant state with its sister, South Korea, we see some very distinct differences.
And South Korea isn't authoritarian and hyper-militant. Of course, lack of critical thinking amongst liberals rears its head again. South Korea started off as a literal fascist puppet dictatorship of the US, and basically stopped being so last week in the grand scheme of things, with the transition to democracy being a transition from a fascist dictatorship of capital to a neoliberal dictatorship of capital, which conveniently had the daughter of the former fascist dictator as the leader. Almost the entire history of South Korea is mired in massacres and horrific repression of communists, who are basically every pro-democracy demonstrator you see in South Korean history. Leftist organizing is still outlawed and gets you a prison sentence in South Korea, and literal slave labor exists against those most victimized by the system, the elderly, homeless, immigrants, prisoners, etc. Back to the video in just a second. Let's hear from today's sponsor, Atlas VPN. For a lot of research that I do for my videos, I end up hitting pages that aren't available in my location. That's frustrating, as you can imagine. Geo-restriction really does suck, but not with Atlas VPN. For those unaware, a virtual private network makes all of your internet traffic travel through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it protects you from spying, public Wi-Fi dangers, and hides your IP address and your online activities. It even allows you to change your location for all your researching needs. Developed by top cybersecurity specialists and IT engineers in 2019, Atlas VPN was created to make the internet accessible and secure for everyone. Currently, it has more than 6 million users worldwide and boasts the best VPN deal on the market. Right now, there's a fantastic Christmas special. So, what are you waiting for? Go down to the description and click that link, use my code Hakim, and get a 3-year subscription for just $1.70 a month with 6 months extra on top. But that's not all. You get blazing fast speeds for streaming or gaming, unlimited protection for all your devices, an inbuilt ad and malware blocker, and you'll get to save some extra cash, as Atlas VPN will find you the best deals online from everything from your online subscriptions to airlines, hotels, and more. Have a private Christmas and a safe New Year with Atlas VPN Premium. You can have all of this for just $1.70 per month plus 6 months for free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Click that link in the video description below and grab this Christmas deal right now. Massive thanks to Atlas VPN for the sponsorship. This is what allows me to pay my editor fairly, so the support is highly appreciated. Alright, back to the video.
South Korea is wealthy, modern, and a technological powerhouse.
Because of no sanctions, preferential treatment, and massive funding by the US, an absolute disregard for labor laws for most of its history, and also nearly a 50% poverty rate for the elderly, to the point that women up to their 80s are forced to prostitute themselves in order to get by. Yet another liberal pitfall, falling for the glitz and glamour but not looking at the side streets underneath all the pretty nightlights. Also, South Korea has one of the most brutal educational and professional landscapes, resulting in some of the highest suicide rates on Earth. Be honest, had the DPRK had one of the highest rates, the propaganda against them would have been unending.
Its people are generally healthy and free to pursue their own endeavors as they choose. They get along well with most of the civilized world, and no one is afraid of South Korea attempting to nuke anybody. These two countries, separated by nothing but a small expanse of demilitarized land and some barricades, provide a fascinating look at how two different tracks of development can lead to drastically different outcomes in a population that was once unified.
I wouldn't describe the highest rate of plastic surgery as healthy, with work, life, and social stress resulting in the aforementioned rate from the previous point, and is a form of having to get into a good preschool, to good school, to good high school, to good university, to hopefully good company to slave away for. Not exactly free to choose, I'd say. The civilized world comment is a yikes liberal comment you see a lot. Unless a country is friendly to usually wealthy white capitalist interests, is not part of the quote-unquote civilized world. I think it's clear that there's nothing civilized about colonial and imperialist wealth extraction. As for the fear point, well, the DPRK is scared for its own existence as it's threatened daily. Also, the US would be doing the nuking in that case, as they did before in Japan and threatened to already do dozens of times to the DPRK. The geographic divide and political environment both countries found themselves in have definitely resulted in very different endpoints. That being said, the way that came about was inherently undemocratic, in which the US and their allies forcibly prevented elections due to fear the communists would win, which they did, forming a unified Korean republic that was immediately dismembered by the Americans. Afterwards, South Korea became a standing ground of reaction, used for every anti-communist crusade around the world, with black sites, massive political repression, and a hand-picked leadership by the US. All of which I think you'd agree aren't exactly democratic. On that point though, the DPRK is undemocratic. Well, is it? Is South Korea, or the US for that matter, democratic? Democracy from the Greek means rule by the people. A democracy, even by dictionary terms, is a society in which the majority of people have the ability to make decisions about their political and social life. We're not Philistines here, we understand that everything has a class character. Democracy is no different. The democracies of South Korea or the US are set up with the interests of a narrow group of people who own a lot. Of course, with one basically being a colony of the other. You have the choice between the capitalist party and the other capitalist party. You cannot vote out private property ownership, or wage labor, or markets. Massive donations are made to political groups by that same class to ensure that their interests are the ones being served. Many so-called representatives sit full half-centuries in the same position, and in many levels of government. There are unelected positions that do essentially whatever they want. In some places as well, only a single person is on the ballot. This isn't even mentioning economic democracy, the most important type, as it directly deals with the bulk of your waking day and your material remuneration as part of your work. This democracy is simply non-existent in South Korea or the US, and with that comes all the major uncertainties and anxiety of working in a capitalist firm in a capitalist system. Regardless, and here's the bit that's controversial but shouldn't be, the DPRK has a fairly decently functioning model of proletarian democracy, not too dissimilar from Cuba. If you really are skeptical, don't take my word for it, but of the Swiss Interparliamentary Union, which published, amongst other things, the driest possible bulletin and minute report of a 1992 session in the DPRK, which had some Q&A section from parliament members all over the world. For an overview though, the DPRK has county, city, and provincial elections to local people's assemblies, as well as national elections to the Supreme People's Assembly, their legislature. These are carried out every 5 years. Candidates are chosen in mass meetings held under a democratic front government, which also organizes the various political parties in the DPRK. The system is essentially tiered, in which people volunteer themselves or are volunteered by others for a position, a vote is taken at the mass meeting, which anyone can attend, and afterwards there's a confidence vote in which the person is subject to a yes-no choice by the greater public, so a larger subset than those of the meetings. This is reproduced at various levels within the DPRK. Equally, there is an active democratic process in running enterprises in the DPRK according to the Taiwan cooperative system of workplace management, but this video is dragging on long enough. What does this teach us? That there is some democratic process within the DPRK, and that it's different than in liberal democracies. Is it perfect? Is it all pervasive? Blah blah. These are questions outside the point currently, but all relevant for a future discussion. If you want it to be as disingenuous as possible, then you could only get away with saying the US, South Korea, and the DPRK are all around the same level of undemocratic. Putting any of them above the DPRK though is simply ideology at play, in which democracy is conveniently defined as whatever the US is and whatever governments it's allied with. An excellent read into the Taiwan cooperative arrangement within workplaces, as well as the DPRK political system, take a look at this article from Right to Rebel. As for the Kim dynasty stuff, that's just simply racism at play. Every single Kim occupied a variety of differing positions, and the reverence for the family is a mixture of Confucian cultural heritage, as well as rightful praise for a family that played a pivotal role in the anti-Japanese struggle, independence, and restructuring of Korea. Nothing the Americans do to or for their founding fathers is any stranger when that context is brought into play. Likewise, no similar criticism was made of similar South Korean political appointment. With that being said, the rest of the video basically makes claims like poor North Koreans will work for pennies, investment opportunities for capitalists, cheap materials, which are always the real reasons for wanting to destabilize the DPRK. Otherwise, some other liberal nonsense spread often but absolutely unsubstantiated, like an uneducated populace despite the DPRK's educational statistics being very good, some stuff about internet censorship versus unregulated internet access, and issues with corruption, all of which even liberal JT of the past knew would be present in a capitalist North. Contrary to Second Thought's current track record of banger after banger, this type of video just goes to show that even deeply entrenched liberal presuppositions and approaches to acquiring and then presenting information can be unlearned for better habits, alhamdulillah. Of course, shout out to my brother and beloved JT from Second Thought, whom I share a podcast with, along with the ever lovely Yugopnik. I adore these boys to death, and it's fun doing a sort of friendly commentary sort of analysis video from one of them. Check out both of their fantastic channels, as well as our podcast, The Deprogram. That's all for this time. If you like what I do, then please consider supporting me on Patreon, it really does help. I'd like to thank my patrons, so thank you to Ned Wanda, Mike, Peter Lewis, Emil Vakitov, Isaac Anke, Savo, Felix Paulson, Amin Nishad, Abdurrahman, and Ahmed Berge. Thanks for watching.